to operate your central heating in the most effective way, how to claim benefits that maybe you didn't know you're entitled to, what to do if your mortgage deal is about to run out, and if it all goes wrong and you end up in debt, what are your options? So do send me your questions in right now and I'll do my best to pass it on. First up though, we're going to talk about central heating, because one of the biggest rises in our household budgets recently has got to be the increase in electricity and gas bills. And as winter approaches, the cost of heating our homes is something that we're all worried about. But there are some things we can do to make sure that we're not wasting energy, and then that equals not wasting any of our money. Now, there are a lot of myths. I can think of loads to do with your central heating. So Jack McGovern, who is the Managing Director of Glow Heating Services, which is based in North Hykeham, is here. They install and maintain gas and heat source central heating systems. Morning, Jack. So with you working in the industry, how are you feeling actually about your energy bills? Are you all right?
Well, I took the decision a little while ago to install a heat pump at my house, moving away from natural gas. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing for everyone. I just kind of made that decision just to experiment a little bit, really.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of here, Jack, to give us the lowdown on things that we can do to save some money. So is it possible, I guess, first of all, to save money by adjusting your heating system?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, your obvious ones straight away are if you've got a condensing appliance, which is like if you're on a said book rating. If you buy a washing machine nowadays, everything's A rated, isn't it? You may have seen that bar chart that you get that's colour coded. So if you've got a non-condensing boiler, they were made mandatory in 2005. So ultimately, if you've got a condensing appliance, that is the most efficient type of heating, gas central heating boiler you can have. So if you've got an appliance pre-2005 still, there's a good saving there to be made straight away. And then after that, if you have got a more up-to-date appliance, there are still things which can sort of fine-tune it, a bit like you'd fine-tune a car, to get the most out of that appliance as well. Okay, so what are those things that you can do then? To be fair, they're probably not spoken about enough, but any condensing boiler, so you'll know what a condensing boiler is because it'll have a white pipe beneath the boiler. These boilers are designed to operate at lower flow temperatures, but in truth, a lot of systems out there, 95% of the systems that we go to that have been installed from other companies are operating at quite a high flow temperature, and that temperature I'm referring to is how hot your radiators physically get to touch. And that in turn obviously makes the rooms comfortable for you to obviously feel like you're warm enough. So if you fit a decent control and a modulating control, we call it, it can actually predict and work your boiler to its optimum and adjust that flow temperature a little bit better, to ensure that your boiler's working as a variable source of heat output as opposed to working at one fixed rate. It may sound a little technical, but once you've got your head around it, it's relatively simplistic, but ultimately it's just about getting a heating engineer that's got the right knowledge to link up the boiler with the correct control for it to work at its maximum. Okay, so that's something that we'd have to get an engineer out to look at that. That's not something maybe that, I could do a bit of Googling and go and do. So, yeah, if you had a combination boiler, very, very common for people to have combination boilers. There's not a perfect answer for every situation, you see, because lots of people have different types of systems. Yeah. But a nice simple win if you've got a Combi boiler, which is very common now, is you've got independent heating and hot water control. So you could lower your temperature of your radiators to, say, somewhere around 60 to 65 degrees. And then this is going to mean that the boiler is going to condense more. And condensation and the boiler condensing more is important because when the boiler is in a condensing mode, it's using more of the latent heat inside the heat exchanger to its optimal efficiency. If that boiler is working at very, very high temperatures, really it's no different to a non-condensing boiler that's pre-2005. Okay. So if you had a combination boiler, in short, you could turn the flow temperature down to 60, 65 degrees. It means that your boiler is going to be more economical to run. It's going to condense more. However, the caveat to that is the lower that you put that temperature, the lower the temperature your radiator is going to get. In turn, your home may take slightly longer to warm up. So it's kind of about finding that right balance between efficiency and comfort which is where you do get, which is where obviously if you've got a heating engineer that knows what they're talking about, they should be able to sort of give you the best of both worlds on that one.
Yeah, guide you in that one. And Jack, I'm going to play a song in a minute, but I just want to ask, what about if you don't have a combi boiler? Is your advice really to maybe have a look at investing?
Well, no, combis are fit for the purpose on the house. If you've got a larger house, it'd be better to have a stored volume of hot water, people would argue, but you can't give that same advice on a system where there's stored water, because we need to have a certain heat in the tank, in the hot water tank, to kill off legionnaires and things like that. So in that situation, it would be poor of me to say, people adjust your boilers, because then ultimately it could be sort of a safety concern, which is why I'll always go back to, really, you do need to obviously have a qualified engineer that's actually tuned up and thinking about the efficiency of a system, not just the safety of a system on a service. Okay,
so yeah, it just depends on each individual house, or if they've got a flat and that kind of thing. It just each one is set.
Yeah, you have to take every situation in isolation, really. Unless you've got a combi boiler, that's something I can confidently say. You can adjust your central heating flow temperature down. You can adjust your hot water down. There's no safety concerns with that. You can maximise the efficiency out of the appliance. Anything else is a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more grey, and ultimately you'd have to look at that individual situation on its own merit.
Okay, Jack, stay there. I've just got a few more questions, because I'm sure you get this all the time, but there's lots of myths, isn't there, around central heating. So we'll tackle a few of them in just a little bit. But first, for a cost of living special, we've been hearing from Jack McGovern, Managing Director of Glow Heating Services. They're based in North Hykeham, talking to us about how really we can save money on our central heating. Now, Jack, I hear so many different myths around what is best to do to save money with your central heating. So can you answer this question once and for all? Is it best to leave your heating on all day on low, or is it best to sort of set it on a timer?
I can answer it, but I can't say what's the best way to do it.
Okay.
So there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. If you have, referring back to what I was saying there, so you have a modulating control, which is varying the output of the appliance, like I said earlier, you could argue in some circumstances, depending on how the homeowner uses their heating and depending on the heat loss of the property, which are two variables, you could argue that leaving the heating on for longer periods of time on the correcting control will mean your boiler or heating system will run more efficiently, because it can trickle in energy at a lower power. Than having something that's coming on for a couple of hours in the morning and working at 100 miles an hour, and then 100 miles an hour at the end of the day for a couple of hours at the end of the day. The analogy I always use with my customers is it's like driving a Ferrari down the motorway at 120 miles an hour and pulling over on the hard shoulder for a break every so often. If we're trying to do the opposite with a heating system, really, to get it running economically, we want something that's running nice and low on slow, just trickling in energy. So personally, for me, my heating at my property, we have it on low and slow for longer periods. And when it's off, we have a slightly higher setback temperature on the basis that we want to keep the heat in the property. So we don't lose all that heat by having it on once in the morning, once in night. We're sort of supplementing in the off periods a higher, slower amount of energy going in to maintain an overall warmer room temperature for longer periods. However, like I said, that is going to vary home to home.
And you know how it does vary home to home. Can people give you a call and, you'd be able to give advice, or a heating engineer? Is it best, to go and get someone to come and, do a sort of guide on what you could do?
I think so. I mean, obviously, from our perspective, we try and place this quite highly on what we're talking about our customers. Obviously, since the price increases, with energy and things like that, obviously it's a lot more hot topic now, which is the whole reason why I suppose we're speaking today. Whereas in the past, it's sort of been forgotten about a little bit, to be completely honest, and that is a bit of an industry issue. So we're trying to set all the boilers that we install up as finely tuned as we can be, because it's about comfort at the end of the day. We want customers to be warm, but at the same time, we want to be doing that in a thoughtful way, where we're going to ensure that the boiler is not oversized, let's say, not working too hard, working to its optimum. So certainly if you're going to call Glow, I'd like to think all of my guys who have all been trained up on this sort of stuff are going to give you the right advice.
Okay, and are there any other myths, Jack, that you can tell us about?
Not myths as such. Well, yeah, I suppose there is. If you was to have a non-condensing boiler, so a boiler that's fitted pre-2005, it would actually be cheaper to turn certain rooms off in the house if you had thermostatic radiator valves. The reason being is because a high temperature appliance, which is always burning at the same rate. If you had a condensing boiler, again, it's a bit more of a grey area on the basis that is it actually best to turn rooms off that are being unused? You could argue if you're leaving doors open and such like that, if you turn one radiator off, that heat next door is going to be stolen by the room which isn't turned off. So yeah, there's a few myths really. I mean, how I like heating systems to run and how they run most efficiently is low and slow ultimately, and gradually getting the whole system and the whole house up to an equal temperature, and obviously cooling down at an equal temperature. Smart stats are a little bit of a myth in regards to too much control, too much zoning can be quite a bad thing when you're talking about efficiency.
Okay, is that like Hive and things like that, the smart systems like that?
Yeah, so your Hive is a smart control because you can use it from your phone, but it really isn't a smart control in regards to optimizing the output of your boiler. So the two things on a gas boiler that you can use and on a heat pump, which are linked together, are things like weather compensation. So they optimize the boiler's output depending on the outdoor temperature, which is obviously a variable, which means that your boiler optimizes its usage depending on the outdoor temperature. And the other one is a modulating thermostat, which is trying to predict this by measuring the internal temperature of the property from the room thermostat itself. So Hive is great because you can control it from your phone, but it's really not making your boiler any more efficient.
Okay, last one, Jack, because I feel like I could talk to you all day about all this with central heating. But you mentioned about the flow, adjusting the flow temperature is probably one of the best ways of saving money. I guess if that's the thing you could explain to us before you go.
Yeah, so condensing boilers, when the return temperature, so the water that's coming back from the radiators, is 54 degrees or lower, condensation occurs, starts to occur in the appliance, in the heat exchanger. When condensation is occurring inside a boiler, it means that it's extracting the most amount of energy that it can from the combustion process, somewhere where the flame's occurring. So if you can lower your flow temperature and you've got a combination boiler, if you could try that on, say, 60 degrees and all your rooms are still feeling comfortable and all the rooms getting up to temperature, then you are going to have a boiler that's 90% of the time in condensing mode. And that is ultimately going to mean that your boiler's, running for the combustion process as efficiently as it can be. From there, the next step would just be looking at your controls and just making sure that you've got the right controls for your system.
Jack, thank you so much for your help. Really appreciate it. All the myths and everything that you've busted and all the advice. So really appreciate that. Jack McGovern there, Managing Director of Glow Heating Services. They're based in North Hykeham. So the advice there from Jack really is there's no one size fits all. It's best to just go and find out what would work best in your home. But there's some really good tips there from Jack and things to look into and find out for central heating to help you save a little bit of money.